Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Politics Relaxed. It's good to be back. Probably the last episode again for a bit of a while just because of exams, but I'm sure that normal progress will resume eventually. This week, we're talking about local elections. As you can probably see by my face, I'm very happy with the Labour victories that have happened across the country. We've had London mayoral races, we've had mayoral races across the country. Police and crime commissioners and local councils have all been up for election. So there's a lot to talk about.
What I can say is I personally did have quite a dreadful night because we were waiting for Bristol to count votes, and there are quite a few people in Bristol, and they're quite slow at counting. It turns out, just waiting for hours on end in a sports hall with domino pizza for any semblance of results to come in, and then we lost the Peace and Crime Commissioner election in Avon and Somerset, which was a running trend across the country. We've lost a number of very hardworking, excellent police and crime commissioners who have been reducing crime, opening new police stations, including here in Bath, all across the country. And I think it's deeply regretful that voters have been unable to see past their disillusionment with national issues to focus on the local ones yet again in local elections. And I've spoken about this the last 2 years. We've had poor local election results, and every time I've had to say the same thing. And it's deeply upsetting. Once again, we've lost nearly 500 councillors. We've lost over 10 councils in terms of control. And in the mayoral elections, this was, I think, the defining part of this week's elections. It hasn't been too bad. We know that most mayoralties are supposed to be Labour. They are generally Labour. They've been held by Labour. And so the two that we had held before, which were Tees Valley and West Midlands, we have the Tees Valley result. Ben Houchin, obviously, extremely hardworking guy, done an excellent job in Teesside with the airport, with the Freeport, and he's very popular. Andy Street done a great job regenerating the city centre in West Midlands. We don't quite have the result for that yet. Apparently there's 2,000 votes in it. Hopefully he'll get that over the line. Sadly, we have another 4 years of Sleek Calm, but I'm sure we'll get into that later. The results have been poor. Mm-hmm. We expected it to be poor. It's not a surprise.
Piers, I wanted to go to you. I mean, Cameron mentioned about police and crime commissioners. Obviously, like me, the first time voting. I think you voted the police and crime commissioner election. So I wonder.
I did. I did vote in Surrey for police and crime commissioner. There are four options. Obviously, Labour, Lib Dems, and Conservatives. I voted independent because I'm non-confrontational. But no, I think for certainly for Labour, crime is always a hard sell there. But the fact that a lot of places have flipped there is certainly a significant victory for that party, even if it's a lot are still held by Conservatives, including Surrey, who re-elected our Conservative PCC. But yeah, I mean the position of PCC in general is still sort of up for debate in terms of its effectiveness. But I suppose that's just for each government to decide whether they want it or not. But across the board, it's not for Labour. It's looking pretty good, although there might be a few things to worry about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. At least coming at it from a Labour perspective, I think it's been a good set of results. I think West Midlands is definitely, obviously we don't have the result yet, but it's going to define whether it is a good set of results or a really good set of results, because I think if Labour wins West Midlands, there's very, very little for the Tories to kind of point to say, this is a good result. They only have Tees Valley, and the Tees Valley result was never really going to go to Labour. You look at it was 70% last time. It was won by 70% by the Tories, so it was always going to be really difficult for Labour. But overall, I mean, I think it's been a pretty good set of elections. Obviously, I think the issue of Gaza has definitely been a one that Labour have to take from this, because for a lot of areas, independent candidates have been doing particularly well. I mean, I'm not sure how much that would actually translate into a general election. You have all the big
Yeah,
in the
wouldn't.
sky. They all do these like projected, models. And they're like, oh, this is going to translate to a hung parliament. But do we really expect the Lib Dems to do, or the Green Party, or independent
Or
candidates,
independents.
to be doing anything like they've done in these elections? So I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I voted in independent police and crime
Mm,
commissioner. I wouldn't vote independent in my constituency because
yeah.
I know that like at least they independents have chances in local elections, but it's just not a thing to have independents on a national scale. So I would vote for the party.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, in a way, the kind of national vote share actually is quite good for Labour because A, it's like stopping complacency, both within the party and also for voters. Because if voters see this as like, the general election as being quite close, they're more likely to, not stay at home and they're going to actually come out and hopefully vote, which is obviously a better thing. You would prefer a high turnout. Rajan, any thoughts from you?
Well, I think obviously this was a very known result. I honestly think that the Conservatives just need to go back and really think things through about how they can come back better next time. It's just nobody was gonna no one was gonna deny these set of results. They were bad, and I from working with various conservative politicians and councillors, they weren't very optimistic. It was a lot of fielding of paper candidates for quite a lot of the seats.
Mm.
So it really, it just isn't. There isn't really headlines there for the Conservatives at
Mm.
all. I don't know. It's not surprising at all.
Yeah,
I
I
mean, I
wonder.
suppose
Go on, go on.
yeah. What's probably what they're or at least in Downing Street, what they're most happy about is that there doesn't look likely that there'll be a rebellion against Sunak or attempts to replace him, which I think everyone can agree would just be ridiculous because
Yeah.
it doesn't exactly remove any of the problems with Sunak by replacing him with someone else. So I suppose he can breathe a sigh of relief of that, even if it's a brief one.
Yeah, and I guess the question is then, like, if it's not Sunak, who's to blame for this result for the Tories? I guess that's something that I haven't really heard discussed very much. So I wonder if one of you two really could.
Well, I think it's Sunak.
Yeah.
That it's very much not Rishi's fault. That I as a local activist, knocking on doors, talking to people, the frustration is not solely with Rishi Sunak and what he's done. In fact, many people look at his record in government, delivering things like smoking ban. He's had multiple foreign policy successes, and bringing inflation down and interest rates stabilized. And they're quite impressed with much of the work he's done. But people are very disillusioned with the whole of politics. You speak to multiple people who will just say, no, they're all the same. I'm not bothering with any of them. Lots of turnout has decreased again. It's concerning. And personally, I have to put the blame from the Conservative point of view on just successive failures by Boris Johnson when he was in government, a failure to control his government and run a scandal-free government, and then Liz Truss's, terrible handing of the equality, which we all called. Sadly, the Conservative Party members saw fit to put her in office, which anyone with basic economic understanding could see was a terrible decision. We acted fast to rectify it. The Conservative Party removed her extremely efficiently and replaced her with Rishi Sunak, who should have been the right choice in the first place. And I do believe that if we had elected him when I voted for him in the summer of 2022, then we would not be in this position right now. It's impossible to say. Rishi Sunak is unfortunately not strong enough at politics, although he's good at governing. He's not strong enough at politics to turn us around, in my opinion. We just have to accept that we're probably going to lose the election, and we need to think about rebuilding from there. That being said, I always want us to fight. The Conservative Party currently has no fighting spirit. It's not fit for purpose in terms of activism. We need to inject a little bit of fighting spirit into it and try and win everywhere, wherever we can, by however much we can.
That's a very
I guess-
politics A-level phrase, fit for purpose.
That's fantastic. I thought I was in the halftime changing room team talk there, but
I guess you
right.
were trying to avert your eyes when Cameron started talking about Liz Truss and how anybody with any economic sense is failure coming.
As Cameron said, I did vote for Rishi Sunak the first time. I was published saying that in the Times. But I think in terms of who's to blame for these local election results, I mean, there is no one blame. I think it's a matter of momentum. I mean, anyone could have seen this coming, even if they were blindfolded. So really, just momentum and the amount of things that have been snowballing over the last few years. You can't really stop a snowball. That's built to such a great mass rolling down the hill. Not going to stop that.
Yeah, I guess that's something that's like come out in terms of Keir Starmer with the election results. I think like Labour will be disappointed in areas with because look the results are good. They don't look great for Labour in my view. Like it's one to take, but it's not going to be one that we're going to be talking about in like a year or 2 years time, being like, oh, this was an amazing set of results that put us on for like a landslide or whatever.
Yeah.
That's not the type of results that came out, especially with the independent candidates that did well. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about Labour's response to what's going on in the Middle East, and I think that's definitely like harmed them. And it was always going to be difficult, I think, for Keir Starmer to try and find a balance on the like issues in Gaza. But I don't know. I mean, I think especially that LBC when he did that LBC interview and whatever Labour wanted to call it, misspoke or said the wrong thing. Like that really has damaged the party, and I think it's damaged trust among like voters, and I think that has come out in these local elections.
We're talking a lot about the threat posed by reform, and I understand it, but I think inside the party we're blowing a lot of hot air here because it's an issue where when you look at reform supporters, lots of them are not necessarily democratically involved. They just want to rage against the system. And this, I think we've done some data internally in the party where it shows quite a number of the people who you see really actively promoting reform on social media either aren't registered to vote or not voted recently or previously at all. So I don't think that we need to be too concerned by the threat posed by reform. Yes, they could knock off 5-10% of our vote share in the next election. I don't think that if we had that 5% or so in the next election, that would mean that we could win anyway. So yeah, we just have to take it on the chin. They're not going to win any seats. That's one thing we can be pleased with.
I think it's somewhat comparable to what Labour has. I mean, maybe not to the same extent with the Greens and possibly, independent candidates as well, because especially, I don't know, Keir Starmer's leadership was obviously disenfranchised quite a lot of the kind of Corbynite left of the party that will then maybe, look to turn to the Greens. But I think the difference is Labour are in such a much stronger position that they can kind of resist that change and almost, not ignore it. And obviously they have to recognise that is a group of support they're not going to win, but they don't need that support necessarily to go on to win a general election. Whereas if the Tories want any chance of even holding on to these seats that they really would want to hold on to, that reform, even if it is as you say 5% of support, I think that can be really dangerous, because that's going to be the margins that the election is determined upon because of our electoral system.
What people just need to remember, and I know that Rishi Sunak is trying to drive this home a lot, is if you are voting for reform, you are basically giving Labour a helping hand into office. You're giving them a little booster. That's what you're doing. You're getting a stool, which is going to help them up into office. That's what you're doing by voting reform. Okay, you're buying one of those stools that kind of retract. They come out and then you step onto them to get things off the top of cupboards. You know what I mean? That's what you're. Yeah. So what we need to do is make sure that if you want to deal with the issues that you care about, and I know because I've spoken to people who have voted Conservative in the past who have been Conservative activists in the past, but are now considering reform because they believe that the Conservative Party is failing to be Conservative fundamentally. What you need to remember is this is not a one nation Conservative government, okay? This is a government that is delivering on a whole wide range of issues. In the summer, very shortly actually, we're going to have the flights going off to Rwanda. We have already seen a reduction in the number of illegal migrant crossings of the channel. We are taking a hard stance on issues like gender ideology. So this is the party for you.
Yeah, so obviously Sadiq Khan, despite the rumors that were swirling around in some sections of Twitter that take their inside gossip from Conservative HQ, who was saying that it was going to be a really tight race, and before any votes had been counted, that Susan Hall was going to storm to victory. Sadiq Khan won pretty comfortably, right? I mean, Sadiq Khan, I don't think was ever going to lose, and for me, I felt pretty happy. I mean, as I say, I got to vote for the first time, and I voted for Sadiq very proudly because I think he's done a really good job actually in London, and he gets a lot of hate, and his detractors are certainly there, and there are definitely he's not perfect, and there are definitely things that he could have done better on. But I think the fact that you have a candidate that was retweeting Enoch Powell and saying that she was going to scrap universal free school meals is not the candidate that I think me and so many other Londoners did not want to represent them, and so I'm pretty happy that Sadiq has won quite comfortably.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty much a foregone conclusion. Obviously, there has to be an election, but it's really. Does anyone know if he got more or less vote share than last time?
I think it was he won by more. It was.
Yeah, I would assume so. So I mean,
it's the second
Susan Hall.
I know in mayoral history, other than Ken Livingstone.
Okay, well, it's not like there's been that many elections. Yeah, Susan Hall was a much less of a character than Sean Bailey in terms of notoriety. Yeah, so it really wasn't going to turn any other way, even though he gets a lot of hate, especially in outer London. But yeah,
even that didn't translate right into when you look at the actual vote shares. I mean, even in outer London, it's not like the Tories were really eating into Sadiq Khan's lead or even gaining more. The ULEZ factor that everyone talks about so much didn't actually have that much.
Yeah, no, that didn't materialize. And just one thing I found interesting: the race for third place was extremely tight because the Lib Dems beat the Green Party by 70 votes.
Wow.
Yeah. All I've got to say is I'm very upset that Sadiq Khan is going to be Mayor of London for another term. I'm very happy that I no longer live permanently in London.
Even Lawrence Fox can go live in the green pastures outside of London.
The crime rate in London is completely unacceptable. That has been presided over by Sadiq Khan. Boris Johnson did cut crime. He did cut crime, knife crime and gun crime when he was Mayor of London. And we've seen exponential rises in that since Sadiq Khan took over. In my opinion, he's presiding over an extremely divided London, largely due to racial multicultural issues, and now also the issue of the Gaza Strip, which is obviously causing so many disruptive protests in everyday life for people who just want to go about their daily business. So look, London is not somewhere where I think the Conservatives expected to win. I regret the fact that we put up Susan Hall as a candidate in the first place. I'm surprised that we could not find any stronger candidate than that. It's a shame because you're right. She said some questionable things in the past that were well reported, and she, to be honest, I'm not sure that she would have made a good mayor as a character in herself. So that's why I didn't get particularly involved in any London-related campaigns. But I hope that we can see some sort of improvements at last in the situation of London. But I don't think we will. Of course, the war on motorists, the ULEZ and the 20-mile-an-hour zones.
The war on motorists.
It didn't turn out
That's an old attack line.
It didn't turn out to be a particularly important like valence issue in this election. I still, when I talk to people in London, plenty of people will criticise him for it, but it's not the issue that's forefront on people's minds. Personally, when I'm in London, I'm more concerned about the state of our crime.
You know, central government has cut police funding and they've cut like funding for youth clubs, and like at least in part they've got to take like a fair bit of responsibility for the reason that knife crime is like going up in London. I mean, sure, you can blame Sadiq Khan as much as you want, but Sadiq Khan has invested in the police, and I think also with the like at the very bottom, he's trying to deal with a lot of the kind of systemic issues that come with crime, because I think it's very easy to just say, oh, well, you can increase like police numbers and you can increase stop and search, but also ultimately you want to be dealing with the root causes of knife crime, which, you know, I think Sadiq Khan is at least trying to address. And then I also want to come back on Cameron saying that like London is like, it's multiculturalism is like, you know, clashing, and that's an issue, when in reality you have a candidate for mayor, a Muslim candidate for mayor, who's faced like countless death threats, racism online. I mean, Susan Hall was the one joining anti-ULEZ groups that had loads of anti-Muslim sentiments in them. So the candidate that was going to be serious for London and multiculturalism and celebrating London's differences was always going to be Sadiq Khan, and it was never going to be the person who was supporting like Donald Trump and supporting like Sadiq Khan stood up to Donald Trump. Susan Hall was like tweeting supporting Donald Trump. That was the difference between the two candidates, and I'm glad that London stood up and said we are a multicultural city that's proud to be multicultural.
It's very widely spread. I think there are a lot of people who are suggesting CCHQ want Sadiq Khan to win, or at least don't care. Maybe they want him to win because they can keep on pointing out his failing track record, maybe. Or maybe they just don't really care enough to bring in a good candidate. Firstly, I would disagree with that sentiment, because the Conservative Party did look for some high-profile candidates. You know, they considered Karen Brady, Judge Rinder, sort of high-profile celebrities to potentially take.
That's really funny.
There was some effort there.
I'm sure Judge Rinder would have done a better job than Susan Hall, to be fair.
Well, probably, although he wouldn't have won.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, maybe, but number 10's favoured options out of the ones who they did manage to convince was Daniel Korski, who obviously then had allegations made about him. And if it weren't for the allegations, then Daniel Korski was actually looking like quite a good candidate potentially for London. So that was unfortunate and regrettable. But where I will agree with you is that CCHQ didn't put much effort into this campaign at all. Maybe because they don't particularly back Susan Hall as a candidate, maybe because they don't have much interest in winning London. But it all comes back to this point that I've been talking about earlier, and that I talk about a lot nowadays, which is this lack of fighting spirit. We're basically just taking railing after railing, and we're genuinely not trying to fight back at all. And I find it really irritating as an activist. But maybe it's just because I'm a young activist, and maybe it's because young activists have a little bit more fight in them. But you know, I'm used to fighting to win, not fighting to.
But that's coming from the top, isn't it? That's coming from Rishi Sunak. Like, Rishi Sunak is not a politician, like, really. He's not got much experience. And, you know, ultimately, I don't think he's really in this. His heart isn't in it. He wants to go and move to, like, California with his wife after retiring, like, after losing an election, and then go on a speaking tour. Like, that's really what he wants. He doesn't really want to be in Downing Street.
No, I don't agree with you. I think he definitely wants to be Prime Minister. And that's why he's going to be going in this next general election really wanting to win. I have no doubt about that. But where I will agree with you, and I made this point earlier, is that as a politician, in terms of selling the dream to people, that's a skill that he hasn't developed to the same extent as his ability in government and legislating. Okay,
very diplomatic.
So that's an area that, particularly for the campaign trail, I think we really need him to improve on. And I agree that means that it can seem as though that lack of fighting spirit comes from the top. But I also believe there's a lot of grassroots issues in the Conservative Party with how we run campaigns that we need to change to inject a little bit of fighting spirit. It's just complacency, to be honest. And I think that we can turn it around in some parts of the country, but we're not trying hard enough.
Yeah, I mean, finally, we should probably talk about Brian Rose, considering everyone on Twitter has been in our mentions constantly throughout the campaign for London Mayor, telling us about Brian Rose and what he's up to. I mean, he ended up in a pretty dismal list, losing to Cam Binface, among others, ending with just 7,501 votes. And for that £10,000 deposit that you have to pay to enter the London mayoral race, I'm not sure it was very worth it for him.
No.
And the other thing is he didn't even bother actually campaigning. Like, all of his material.
Well, he just used all the stuff from 4 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't bother putting a mini manifesto inside the booklet. I mean, the reason you pay so much money to do, like, part of the reason you pay so much to enter the London Mayor is to print out all those booklets that have all the manifestos in, and his wasn't even there.
I don't know what the point is. Like, what is he even trying to do? Like, he's not getting his name out there any more than it was before. And in fact, less. You know, people don't know the name Brian Rose apart from the wonderful people who watch our videos, of course. And of course, when we cook up a little bit of, a stir. But yeah, I mean, he's a bit of a loser, isn't he? He's literally a loser. He's literally a loser.
He's the biggest loser in London.
He's a loser when you interviewed him, and he's literally still a loser now.
I assume the reason he's running is to try and pick up some donations of some sort, but even financially, I don't really see how it's worth it when you're like doing so poorly to pay £10,000 in. So I really don't understand it. I mean, I saw some podcast with him where he was like, "Oh, I'm so disappointed. I was so disappointed after last election's result. Next year, I'm gonna run again and make sure I win it, so I don't feel that again." And then he's gone and won 7,000 votes. I don't know. I don't really know what's next for him because I can't see him running again after getting beat that badly. I mean, sure he can't. Sorry.
He might go back to America.
But he loves London so much, as he always likes to mention. Yeah, I'm sure he'll just be doing his crypto stuff online, trying to get the most money he can out of his supporters. Thank you to all of you for coming along. Thanks to you for watching the video. Please like and subscribe. As I say, might be a few weeks off just with A levels and other exams, but we'll be returning as good as ever following that. So stay tuned and thank you very much.